Wednesday, July 1st here at Cape Ann. Today, Heather and I had more fun interviews for you to share, including a lengthy one with Taylor Bradford of the Gloucester Daily Times. She covered a ton of subjects because we hadn't spoken to her in a week.
Right, lots of news there.
So Magnolia Pier, school superintendent stuff for Gloucester, and my favorite part, rats on Trask Street.
So a lot has happened here in Gloucester and the surrounding communities since last week. We're looking again at the COVID-related instances and what's been going on as the city continues to try to figure out how to best reopen the city and make it safe and accessible for the community, but also protecting people. And a big thing as the weather's warming up, people are wanting to jump in the local quarries. But the big thing is a lot of residents and community members are having a hard time as people from out of the area are coming and parking in their parking spaces, their area, leaving trash, graffitiing. And so we had written a story a while back just about the concerns that neighbors had about this. And actually, as of last week, the city has closed the Lanesville quarries. And that involves a lot, also the trails leading up to it. So people who are looking to go, jump or swim or even just walk the trails over in Lanesville by those quarries aren't going to be able to do that this for the time being until the city decides it's safe and that people are going to be respecting the city ordinances that they've been putting up around the area.
I actually saw a lot of people being towed this weekend.
Really?
Out of Lanesville. So the city was very active.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've also heard, Taylor, of some citizens groups that are cleaning up the quarries. Actually, Corey and I talked to Les Butler last week, and he was talking about, and we talked to Val Gilman about citizens groups that are cleaning up the quarries. Have you heard about that?
I've just heard from different neighbors that they've been really grateful of people volunteering their time to do it, and I did speak to Val as well about that. But I know I hadn't had the opportunity to speak with anybody from the group, so that's awesome to be able to get some of those voices in there. But yeah, it's really interesting because I know the quarries here are famous for a lot of different reasons, and to close them seems pretty significant, and I think it shows that the city is willing to take those steps back in order to kind of, for the long-term health and safety of the community, they'll close things if things really get out of hand. So, but yeah.
And from what I've heard, it's much worse than years past.
Yes, yeah. And especially they've seen a lot of trash, a lot of beer bottles, a lot of graffiti. Which is
fires. I think just recently there were a number of fires left burning, campfires, and it's been so dry. Of course, it's a nightmare scenario.
Yeah, decades-old dilemma for sure. Taylor, you want to talk about cops and kids?
Yeah, so, as kids are slowly coming outside, but still staying within their confinements of their homes or not really hanging out with their family and friends outside of their homes, the Gloucester Police Department has thought of something really innovative for these kids to kind of do their connection with them throughout the summer months. So we know the Cops and Kids program through the Community Impact Unit of Gloucester Police Department, they have started something called SRO Gaming, and that's started by Peter Sutera and Mike Scola, who are the school resource officers. When COVID closed the schools kind of way back in March, these two officers were kind of left wondering how they're going to continue to connect with the kids. And they both are gamers in their personal lives and really love to play different video games. So they thought that it was a great idea to, find a safe and, good platform that they can connect with these kids online. And they started gaming with these kids over Fortnite. So last Thursday they had their test run, and supposedly all things went well, and they had a lot of kids on and trying to navigate how to play Fortnite with these kids when they can't go play baseball or play softball or kind of just hang out in the local parks with them. So
that is a great idea, and so 21st century, right?
Right. And it makes you think of how after we're allowed to go out into public, how this will expand the connection that these police officers have, because some kids, even before COVID, maybe weren't comfortable going outside or doing baseball, that wasn't their thing. So it really broadens the kind of connection with kids that these police officers have, which is pretty cool. And I spoke with a couple of the officers about, there's a couple concerns that I had heard of just, how do you moderate something like that? How do you prevent cyberbullying, stuff like that. And, they said that they're going to have Jeremiah Nicastro, one of the lieutenants. He moderated it as the two police officers played, and he could actually mute people on the platform and, mute them, or kind of, if people were going to comment, he could limit what could be said if need be. And then if, anyone was suspicious activity, he could obviously take them off. So talking about that, but also how this video game, they were very specific on how they chose Fortnite, because, video games are notorious for their violence, and they didn't want to promote violence throughout a police department. And so, they really took some time and actually talked to parents and talked to teachers and students and kids all over just about, what are the video games you play, because they want to be able to connect with those kids. So they don't want to bring up a game that kids aren't going to play. But you also have the juxtaposed by, you don't want gun violence, and that is, the city, and everyone is not promoting that, obviously. So a lot of thoughtful put in by these two officers as they continue. So it'll be interesting to see how it continues throughout the pandemic.
I'm hoping there was at least a little bit of smack talk going on, though.
I know, yeah.
Fortnite, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
All right, we have our best headline of the week, Heather. Taylor, do you want to talk about rats on Trask Street?
Yeah. So I had the privilege to speak with some community members who live over in the area of Trask Street in Warner earlier last week, wanting to touch base about the Trask Street improvement project, because, the pandemic has affected us all, including the project. So seeing how that has been happening. And as I was talking with them, they were like, the construction is not the only thing that's going on around here. And then they decided to bring up, or they were able to mention that there were rats. And rats come about every year to the city, depending on, when their habitats have been disturbed. But apparently this year it's much, much, much worse. I was on the phone with one community member, and as we were on the phone, she counted, I think, 3 rats. And she's like, there's another one runs by, and she said she's afraid to go out into her lawn, which is a real loss during COVID when you don't really feel comfortable to go out into other public spaces. So I was able to speak with representative from the health department, and he was saying how Max Schneck, and he was saying how the uptick in rats this season could be a couple of different things. The thing that I think we're all very eager to kind of put the blame on is COVID, and he's saying restaurants aren't producing as much trash, and so the rats are migrating from downtown up into Trask Street. He said that's probably less likely. What's more of the probable circumstances that the construction is actually just really, really upsetting their places where they're living down under, and they're coming up. And so he kind of gave a few pieces of advice of just, really make sure your trash is closed. If you have any holes under your foundation, maybe try to cover those up, because rats can squeeze really tight into tiny, tiny holes. And so, you don't want to find a rat on your dining room table. So really checking the foundation of your area. But yeah, I mean, it's something that, community members, I was speaking with Melissa Cox, city councilor, and she's just as concerned. And so really trying to find ways to mitigate not only the spread of COVID, but also the spread of rats throughout the city.
Jeez.
Well, I'm old enough to remember when the Big Dig was just starting in Boston, and that was the biggest fear of particularly the North End where I was living then, that the rats that would be, released from once they started to dig things up would invade the North End. And that did not happen.
That's good.
As far as I know. Yeah.
Taylor, jot this down. I want a follow-up story on the killer jellyfish that are now around the Cape too.
Yes.
6-foot jellyfish in Magnolia Pier. So that's a good one. So now we have COVID, rats, jellyfish. It's all happening.
Yeah, you can check out. John Horton just wrote a story on some jellyfish, so check that out. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, you also wanted to talk about the school superintendent situation in Gloucester.
Yeah, so we've covered a lot on the school, just as everything's been happening with COVID, and something that we've all been kind of anticipating is that Superintendent Richard Safire would be retiring as of June 30th, and so he's ending his time this week. And Ben Lummis from the Brookline Schools has been elected as the new superintendent. He signed his contract last week, and he'll be coming in. So Richard Safire has spent 9 to 10 years working with the Gloucester schools over here in Gloucester, and that's a really long time for a superintendent for any school, especially to kind of navigate, hirings and contracts and building projects and different agreements. And so a lot has happened. We wrote a story earlier this week where we interviewed Richard just to hear a little bit about his time here in the city as the superintendent and how he's going to continue his love of education after his retirement. And then actually this afternoon, I had the opportunity to speak with Ben and talk a little bit about the Brookline schools, what his anticipation is for entering into the Gloucester schools during a pandemic, and how he's going to handle all the different projects that we actually have going on in the schools right now here in Gloucester. We talk about the East, veterans project that's happening, and also looking at hiring and trying to create and put new different things within schools. And so a lot of different things are happening in the schools right now, regardless of COVID or not. So how he is best thinking about approaching the situations at hand. So we'll talk about that, and I'll have more for you guys on that later this week.
That's great. And lastly, Magnolia Pier.
Yeah, so not open yet, but really, really exciting stuff is that if you go to Magnolia Pier, there's going to be about 27 American flags lined up. If any community members have seen this, they're billowing in the wind that are hooked up to a brand new pier. The only thing left is the stone masonry out in the very entrance of the Magnolia Pier. But that should be wrapped up by this week. Next week, they're going to have the city inspect it, and then it should be good to go.
The new superintendent will have a lot on his plate when he arrives here. The schools reopening under COVID, how that will happen, the cost of the whole thing. He's got a lot of work.
Yeah, we'll be looking forward to Taylor's article later this week. Our second interview was with Beth Pocock. She is the assistant director at the Sawyer Free Library, and she talks about the Gloucester Reads program.
Yes, it's all about climate change, this Gloucester Reads. And you and I, Corey, are going to read one of those books and have a short conversation with Beth soon.
Gloucester Reads is a community all-city read, but it's with a twist. It aims to unite residents of Gloucester around one common theme, and that common theme is our climate crisis. It's a partnership with a lot of different organizations. I will read them to you right now. Backyard Growers, Gloucester Education Fund, Manship Artists, Maritime Gloucester, Ocean Alliance, and Town Green 2025. And we all got together and wanted to do this reading about climate change so that we can get people talking. And even though it's hard to do right now because there's so many big topics being discussed, worthy topics, but particularly COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter. But COVID-19 really informs climate change. Let me read you what The Economist, there's an article about, it's called Seize the Moment. It's the issue of The Economist. Anyway, they say, following the pandemic is like watching the climate crisis with your finger jammed on the fast forward button. Neither the virus nor greenhouse gases care much for borders, making both scourges global. So it's really the time, we've learned a lot during the pandemic, the ongoing pandemic. As you know, they showed all those pictures of the skies, the clear skies over Delhi and Tokyo because of the reduction in emissions and greenhouse gases. It's those emissions were down something like 17% in April. But I mean, that's a drop in the bucket. But it does show what the effect can be. So we are right now at a very important point, because as we start coming back and governments start giving incentives for growth again, it would be wonderful if some of that could go towards working on the climate crisis. Mm-hmm. So here's what we're doing. We have two books. Where are my little books? Here they are. Walter, can you see that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This is a book by Bill McKibben, who's a major environmentalist. He started the group 350.org. And it's a book, the subtitle is, Has the Human Game Begun to Play Itself Out? It's a New York Times bestseller. And one of the reviews on it says, this book is a love letter, a plea, a eulogy, and a prayer. Wise and warning with everything on the line, don't miss it. So this one is the nonfiction, give you all the facts, by Bill McKibben. I'll tell you about Bill McKibben in a minute. The fiction book is called The Morrow Thieves, and it was written by a woman who's from the First Nations of Canada. And it's a really good story, but climate change, you know, the climate crisis is 40 years in the future. And so Native Americans, Native First Nations are part of a huge climate immigration, which we're seeing now, but we're also, it's predicted there'll be millions of people who have to migrate. So it's just a book to think about. Now that we've been through one global crisis, it really is much more, it doesn't seem quite so fantastic to read about what it might be like. This is an issue that needs a very complex answer and a concerted global effort. And so we're hoping to get people talking, and we're going to have 2 discussion groups on July 9th. One is being led by Jack Clark, who's the head of public policy for Audubon, Mass Audubon. And the other one is by Alicia Pensarosa, who is the assistant director at Ocean Alliance. So these are people who know what they're talking about. And so it'll be a chance to talk. But then the big news is on September 15th, Bill McKibben is going to live stream for us. It was going to be in the high school. Who knows where it'll be now, but we'll tell people how it's going to work. And he's going to talk and do a question and answer.
Oh, very cool.
That's very cool.
Yeah, it'll be great to hear him.
So just to get this, to be clear about this, on July 9th, is Jack Clark will be speaking, and Alicia say her name again?
Pensarosa.
And should we have read the book by then? That's or one of the 2 books?
Because that's not them speaking. That's a book discussion.
Okay, great. Good to know.
So you read the book, and then you go to our website, the calendar, and you register for one of the 2 discussions.
And is one the fiction book and one the nonfiction book?
Yeah.
2 different talks. And so which
2 different talks. The fiction book will be 10 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
The nonfiction book is 7 o'clock at night.
And who is leading the fiction conversation?
Alicia Pensarosa.
Okay, great. But this is all clear on the Sawyer Free Library website for us as we register.
It is. It is really. A lot of work's been done on the website. There's a lot of information on there, and there's a lot of extra resources. And so go to the website. That's a good good place to start.
And on September 15th, Bill McKibben will be discussing his book and maybe accepting some questions, but it's not an interactive.
I don't think he'll talk about the book.
Oh.
I think he will talk about his experience. He started really the first grassroots movement for climate intervention. It's called 350.org. And he travels all over the world, seeing what the situation is and what people are doing. And he, Falter is, I know people don't like to read climate change books because they think they're depressing. And Falter is realistic, but he does give some good, hang on till the end, because he does give some good ideas and good possibilities of ways to work on it. And again, so I think he will just talk about what he sees as a situation now. He may talk about a lot of climate scientists now are talking about what we learned from the pandemic. I imagine he may bring that up as well.
Because this was written before the pandemic. So there's a lot of it's really interesting how much policy might be influenced by COVID, behavioral issues, business issues. It's so much is shifted, at least.
Yes. And 70% of policy that affects climate change is government policy. You know, it's big things that have to happen. We all need to, you know, we can all start driving electric cars and use solar power, but, excuse me. How do I shut that off? Hung up on. But it's going to take a big concerted effort.
Right. So people can find these books through the library. Is that right?
They can. They can either, we have lots of paper books, so they can go to the catalog and just put one on hold, and we will either, they can pick it up curbside or we'll deliver it. There's the Sawyer Free Library card. Thank you very much, Corey.
Yep.
And if you don't have a card, you can now get a card online. Yep. So you don't even have to come into the library. So just go get a card, put a book on hold, and then we'll arrange to get it to you. Or if you want to download Libby or Overdrive and use an ebook, the authors of the publishers of Marrow Thieves have given us what is called a simultaneous accent ebook, so it never runs out. Anybody who wants to read this can read this one. Falter, we have limited, we have a lot of copies, but it's not simultaneous access. These guys are a little snobbier.
So we will, and I'm sure, and people can of course get these books through the traditional means, like small local independent bookstores, right?
Absolutely. We love those too.
Yeah. So perhaps even before July 9th or around July 9th, we can have a little catch-up conversation. And hopefully I will have read the book by now. Corey definitely will have read one of these books.
Got my card right with it. Yeah, I'm ready to go.
I'll check it out to you right now if you want.
Yeah, let's do it.
My card's over there, so I can't reach it right now, but I will. Maybe we could have a short little, book discussion ourselves.
Well, there's 3 ways to get involved. 1, read the book. 2, register for the discussion groups on July 9th. Register on our calendar. And 3, come on September 15th and listen to Bill McKibben.
Great.
That's basically it.
All right. And we will know where it is. All right. Well, thank you so much. And I'm going to have a fun time. We're all going to have a fun time talking about these books soon.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Take care.
Thanks,
Bye.
Beth.
So we are really lucky on Cape Ann because we have this organization called Town Green 2025, and they are doing so much work around climate change. There are a host of partners in this project, but Town Green 2025 are really involved. So this is great to have the whole community involved in reading about this really important issue, which actually intersects with COVID.
And I got to flash my library card too, which I hadn't done that since 3rd grade. So that was nice. All right, that is it for today. We're going to put a bow on this. Join us tomorrow. Our guests are Ian Vincent. He took amazing photos of Dogtown. You have to look at that story on the other Cape, Heather.
The other Cape, yep.
And Mike Chapman. He is part of the Elder Brethren of Manchester. That group has been serving up chowder and chewing the fat for 143 years, but they need your help. So we'll see you tomorrow. Have a great Wednesday night.